Hello, friends. I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's all great and wonderful and fantastic. Everything here is magnificent. A couple weeks ago, somebody I know on Twitter brought to my attention that one of my absolute favorite film directors of all time had a YouTube channel and that it's worth checking out. And so I went and looked, and I was amazed to find some things that I didn't expect to find on there, and also I found exactly what I expected. That director is David Lynch, and David's work is not for everybody. I could talk to you at length about my favorite films and the reasons why, but I think that's up to you to discover if the types of projects that David works on are even remotely interesting to you. If you have Netflix, go look up What Did Jack Do? And watch that. And then we can talk about David Lynch. So anyway, that's not the point. The point is that David is a creator. He was a painter first. And he talks quite a few times in interviews over the years that the reason that he started making movies was because he wanted to see paintings move. And so, keeping that in mind, a lot of his visual representation, a lot of his on-screen stuff is like a very slow-moving painting. And some people take exception to the way that he shoots things because it can be slow and, quote, boring. But he's also really likes vivid imagery. So anyway, been an artist for a very long time, did movies, he's done all sorts of odd creative projects, music is one of them. But a couple of things, going down this rabbit hole of remembering my love for David and watching rewatching some of his stuff, I started looking into some interviews that he did, and he mentions a couple of times, interviewers who interview creative people always ask the same question, and I really liked his response. And the question is, in general, do you journal, or what kind of creative diary do you keep? And David's answer was no, he does not journal, but yes, he takes notes on his ideas. And this intrigued me because I also take notes. But then I kept listening. And what David said is he takes notes so that in the future, when he revisits those notes, he can experience that idea just as fully with enough detail that he can remember what it was like the moment that he had the idea. And that fascinates me because that is not how I take notes. In fact, what I have realized after listening to him talk about it is he takes notes because he is convinced that the idea that he has is worth pursuing. So he'll take lengthy notes in full detail so that he can revisit those ideas. I am the opposite. I take notes so that I can forget. Because what I find is once an idea implants itself in my brain, it becomes invasive. It becomes obstructive, and it will stay there for sometimes months. I've had ideas stuck in my head for years, and they just constantly pop up and want to get thought about, and I don't want to think about them at that moment in time. I'm not ready. I don't have the tasks, or I don't have the skills or the tools or the whatever I need to have to tackle that project, and I just need to get it out of my head. And so I take notes so that I can forget. Because what I have found is the easiest way for me to let something go is to write it down. But the difference is I write a couple of sentences and I move on with my life. Usually that's all it takes. And we've talked about it here on this show. The reason I don't like telling you, meaning anybody, the world, about a project that I want to pursue is because the moment that I speak it, it's just like taking notes. I forget. It's gone. Like that passion, that drive, that whatever is fueling that idea just vanishes. And so for me, growing up, like going to school, I was a pretty terrible student because for me, taking notes meant that I forgot whatever it was we just learned. The moment I started writing it down, it was gone from my brain, and There was no recovering it. That's not to say that everything that I've ever pursued I've forgotten because I wrote down. But that is to say that generally, when I find something wedged in my head and I want to get it out, I take notes. That also means that I journal. I have journaled off and on for most of my life. I've said that I've journaled 10% of my life for 90% of my life, right? Because I only journal when things get stuck in my head. And usually that means things aren't going great, right? When I start to have intrusive, obsessive thoughts about things, that typically means something is going awry. And so I have to write it down, because otherwise it'll just stay and it'll just stew and it'll turn into this spiral, this self-deprecating, self-abusive turn. And so I write it down so I can let it go. And so unfortunately my journals are pretty dark, and they're all written about the worst times of my life. The good news is that I can now go back, because I'm not very good at taking notes, I can go back and read those journals and not revisit those moments in time. But what I'm fascinated about for David is that he seems to be able to take enough descriptive notes to be able to go back and revisit moments in time where he had ideas, and he can fully encapsulate those ideas in words and restart a project. I have a very hard time with that. I'm going through it right now. I've got a game design that I haven't touched in 4 years, and I want to revisit it because I think that the core of that game is really solid, and I think I was on to something. The problem is I have a full set of rules. I wrote a full set of rules, but I never updated them. And I play tested after writing those rules more times, and I changed things, and I have notes about all of that, but these notes are like one sentence, like, remove this. Okay, well, what does that mean? Was I going to do something else? I don't know. And it's really frustrating because I wrote those things down so that I could get them out of my head and move on. I wasn't ready for that project. I wasn't happy with the way that it presented to publishers. I wasn't happy with the feedback I got from some people that I really looked up to. And I wasn't comfortable enough with myself yet to pursue that particular design because I didn't feel like I had it in me. And so I wrote some notes and tucked it away. Here we are 4 years later. I'm ready. I'm ready to look at it again. And I have no clue where I'm at. So I'm basically starting over. I've told the people who are going to play test with me that we're going to play it as it sat 4 years ago without any modifications, because the only way I'm going to be able to move forward is to understand where I was at, and then I can take those notes and throw them away and start from where I am today. But I'm just fascinated that there are people who are capable of taking notes in a capacity that allows them to revisit the past, because I'm really bad at that. So I'd like to know, do you take good notes? Are you good at reviewing your notes, and do those notes help you? Or are you more like me and you write things down and then they make no sense to you later on? Let me know in the comments. Thank you as always for being here. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you're not subscribed, please consider. Thank you for being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is frangible, is an adjective meaning easily breakable. The Worthington staff knows to be excessively careful around the family's collection of frangible Ming vases. Frangible. F-R-A-N-G-I-B-L-E. I personally think that's just a dumb word. Like, fragile just seems to be much cleaner. Why would you use frangible?